There's a quiet type of danger in leadership that's hard to notice when you're in the middle of it. It isn't recklessness, like you might think. It's hesitation. Hesitation is the slow drift toward inaction or doing nothing. A lot of times we wait for perfect clarity on a situation. We want to be sure before we make our next move. Now, the hard part is this feels like we're being responsible. We're being extra careful and safe. We're avoiding mistakes or danger. But the thing to consider is that's how initiative dies or goes away. Whether you're in the field or in a business environment, the environment is not going to wait for you to develop certainty. It's going to keep moving, independent of your appreciation or understanding of the situation. And the thing to keep in mind is if you hesitate long enough, someone else is going to decide for you. It doesn't matter what it is. It could be the situation itself. It evolves, and your understanding of it is no longer relevant. Or it could be chance. Things happen all the time that we could never predict. So one thing to keep in mind is in leading, hesitation is not neutral. Think of it that way. It's action. But it's action by omission. Not doing something, not deciding. If you don't make a decision, if there is an absence of decision, that's still a decision. It's a decision not to act. And to delay when the situation calls for action, you're actually not being safe, you're not being cautious. That's a failure of moral courage. You have to, as the leader, be the one who ultimately is going to make that decision. A good plan executed now is better than the perfect plan executed later. This is a paraphrased quote from General Patton in World War II. It's not a quote to take lightly. It is one that I'd recommend we all keep in the back of our mind as we go through our days, is do I really need more time to make the decision? Is the plan good enough right now? A lot of times it is probably missing detail, but putting it into action sooner is going to affect the environment that you're in. And there's a lot that can be said about that, but the essential thing is to act. And knowing when you have enough information to do so, that's how leaders earn their paycheck. And that's what leaders should expect of their staff, even if it's just one person. Help them decide when we have enough information to make a decision. And when you're leading a team of people, they want to see that. They want to see movement. They don't appreciate why you're taking time to make a decision that they think, even if their understanding is not complete as yours, should be easy to make. So action is important. It not only affects the environment external to your team, but it affects your team. They can see that momentum exists. They can see that there is a plan, even if you don't sit them down and go through it with them. That's what action does. Now, one enemy of all this, there's several, but one big one that none of us like to believe we have is a zero defect mentality. And a zero defect mentality is not just seeking to not make mistakes. It's also the feeling that your way is the best way. It's also a way of protecting yourself from the results of anything that the team is doing. So it may not even, you may not even be able to name the mistakes that you would consider, a defect in the plan or an execution. It's just a mentality where you're giving people the impression that if they try something, and this is the key part, if they try something and it doesn't work out, you don't have their back. And what that does is it turns your team into cowards. And it's not their fault. They're simply in survival mode when you have a zero defect mentality. Because when people fear mistakes, and the result that comes from you from making them, they stop thinking about better ways to do things. And they start waiting around for your decision, for your idea. It's safer and it's more likely than not better than theirs in your mind as the leader. Another aspect of this to keep in mind is you should be able to correct errors made from boldness. It's much harder to correct errors from inaction, doing nothing. An example might be that somebody takes some initiative in designing a product in a certain area, certain aspect or feature of the product, and maybe it's not in line with where you're going with the full design or the launch. You can always backtrack. You can remove that feature. You can change the design back to where it needs to be. But if there's inaction, there's nothing to correct. There's no work there in the first place to do anything with. And that's just the physical result. Much more important to keep in mind is the effect on the people in our team. Are they generally leaning forward to do the great things that we want them to do or should want them to do? Or are they playing it safe? Playing it safe is the best way to think about it in your own mind. And sometimes we as leaders, we stifle initiative without meaning to. We read all the books. We know what we're supposed to do in principle, but our application isn't what it needs to be. An example of this may be too many check-ins. Now, supervision is essential. But the difference between check-ins and supervision is that a check-in really can be pointless. Whereas a supervision or supervising is more of ensuring people are on the right track, have what they need to get their job done. A lot of times we avoid supervision because we think we're getting in someone's business, and you can do that. But what you can't do is omit supervision overall. You have to learn how to do this well. You don't want to smother people's judgment. Supervision is not your opportunity to check the details and adjust them under their feet. There may be some that are just plainly off track. That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is your individual preference on details. And your plan in the first place that sets your people down a path of producing something has to be flexible enough to allow them latitude to make some of those decisions on the way without fear of them being corrected or changed by too many check-ins. Just think about the word check. I'm going to check your work. Whereas supervision, it sounds more like we're going to take a look at the big situation surrounding what you're doing and help you. And one of the long-term results, no matter how good you think you are or how helpful you think you are being, is that your people, if they're trained this way, to expect your involvement too often, they're not going to develop the kind of initiative you need in your team. Now, maybe you don't want initiative in your team. This is something you should reflect on. But the only way to grow is when people on your team exercise initiative and capitalize on opportunities that they come across. You can't delegate trust if you've never practiced it. If your people are used to seeing you at every turn, there's no delegation. Unless it's the most menial task. And nobody comes to work every day looking forward to menial tasks. Another expression to hold in the corner of your mind throughout the day is the more control that you seek, the more flexibility you lose. And that's pretty much what I just described there with too frequent check-ins. But the tighter that you grasp onto not just details, it could be the big picture objectives as well. But the tighter that you grasp those personally, the slower your organization is going to move. Because they have no latitude, no freedom to do anything within that. It's all your idea. And that's another thought to keep in mind as you work with people is why do they come to work? And it could be a lot of things. It could be simply a paycheck, or it could be a great challenge. It could be develop themselves for the future. But whatever it is, on an individual level, if you're their leader, you want to seek to know this. And how do you know it is pretty easy. Actually, you talk to them one-on-one about it. What are your plans? What are your goals for the future? Because if what you need from them differs, or better said, what you demand from your people or ask them to do has to be in line with their goals for any sort of quality result. You want to align goals with people's interests. More on that later. All of this comes back to one word, and that is trust. And trust is not something you can assign to your relationship with a person. You can't make somebody trust you. Trust is woven into the relationship itself. And trust is really everything. The way I used to think about trust over the years in the Marine Corps and even now is that even if you have just the typical day, in fact, the typical days are the ones where it may be more important to do this anyway, is you're earning trust. You are investing in the relationship between you and your people, and you don't expect anything in return. You're investing in the relationship. You're showing people that you're interested in what they do well, and you're helping them with the things that they need to improve, whether it's something you observe or they observe themselves. But if you don't have trust, you're going to be pulled into micromanaging people. You're going to feel the need to become involved with the details of what they're doing on a daily basis. And you are heading down the wrong path for the reasons that I just talked about. Now, if you can avoid doing this, if you can build a level of trust so that you as the leader, you can enable people to do great things, then it's more of, you think of the way that your team operates is music at that point. You have different instruments all in harmony, instruments playing together, but people are working together like an orchestra might. And the opposite of that would be you walking over to each musician and instructing them what to do individually. And you can see with that metaphor there that that's just not how an orchestra would work, and that's not how your team works best either. The word here to describe how you want to execute is decentralized or decentralization. And trust has to grow in a decentralized command or execution environment. And decentralization, what that means is you're going to cede much of the decision making to the people in the team, leaders, and then those leaders should do the same with their leaders, and then those leaders should do the same with their people. And people can act at that point without waiting for permission. This involves everything we talked about to this point. Zero defect mentality can't exist. Trust. And you can have a decentralized environment or decentralized way of executing in your team and still be present for the action. You just have to control your ego a bit. You have to get good at issuing guidance before the action to allow people to plan, to allow people to execute. There's some things that need to be done on your part, but if you are involved in the details that you wouldn't want supervised yourself if you were them, that is your caution. Now, the enemy here is that you think you can do it better, or you think that you personally are the only one that can avoid a costly mistake. Tempting to think that way. And at times it might be the case, but what are you sacrificing in the long run? You're sacrificing the trust, the initiative, and your whole organization is going to be slower. And on the individual level, people are just not going to thrive in that environment. Let's go back to trust for a second. How do you earn trust in a team? You have to be present. Now, in the Marine Corps, we talk a lot about leading from the front, and maybe you talk about that too in your organization, in your team. But it's not just being around. You want to be around when there is a high-stakes situation. When your people are struggling, you want to be around. This is not the time to go work on a pet project when somebody in your team is faced with a costly decision, something that, if not handled properly, can have big negative impact on the rest of the team or the organization. If you are there, even if you're just there with them, going through it, that's when you earn trust. If you have somebody who is anticipating getting a harsh customer reaction, you have to be there. Well, let's say it this way. You don't have to be there, but if earning people's trust is important to you, you should be there. The other way you earn trust is by being good at what you're supposed to be good at, or knowing your job. If you just don't understand, first of all, your role, also important is that you understand at least the basics of what your people are doing. But really what they want you to be good at is your job. And if you're a manager, then they're going to expect you to know how to get them some additional resources, or they're going to know how their administrative tasks should be accomplished. They're going to want to know, they're going to want to see that you know how to do your job. And if you have trust, again, the organization just moves faster. I should say the organization has a higher tempo, because it's not just a matter of moving fast, it's a matter of moving fast in relation to something else, your competition, the market. So tempo is higher. When people trust each other, communication is better, almost telepathic. People can look at each other and know, I'm clear to proceed. Or the opposite, they can see that there's a concern. That's tempo, not technology that we think is going to make everything move faster. Technology without trained, well-disciplined, motivated people using it can actually slow you down. And you and your leadership, you're at the heart of all that. Faith in your people, faith in what they can do, faith in the value of taking action itself, and having a fear of timidity in action. This is something for us to reflect on, is do we actually discourage action and prefer timidity in action? If we're trying to play it safe, if we're trying to preserve our record of mediocrity, then yes, timidity is preferred. But your people don't want that. They don't want it from you, they want it for themselves. And think of the courage to make a decision this way. Courage is deciding when you cannot be certain, but act anyway. That is the weight of a decision. That is when you become a leader. And that is what people expect from you.